everyone. Welcome to the Parenting Show. I'm Jennifer Anderson. With me, as always, my co-host, family counselor, parenting expert, Alyson Schafer, and we are talking about parenting on the same page.
Yes, because I suggested this topic because in the 20 years that I have been teaching parenting classes and having a private practice in counseling, this is the one question that comes up every single time. And
really?
Yes, it's really quite the universal. And part of it is great because part of what we're trying to do with the show is to teach parents about parenting through the lens of Adlerian psychology, Adlerian parenting. And when parents start to learn about it, they get super excited about it. And then they really want everyone that's interacting with their child to parent in the same way, and most especially their partner that they're co-parenting with.
Right.
And the truth is, not everybody knows about Adlerian psychology and positive discipline techniques, and not everybody's interested in learning or reading a parenting book or watching a TV show or whatever. And that can be super, super frustrating because the person who's kind of got all the buy-in wants this really ideal situation where everyone is going to be consistent. And we hear this a lot, like, you should parent consistently. And I agree with the concept of consistency generally, but the truth is our kids are being raised to interact with all the many types of people that are on planet Earth. And they need to know that grandma has different buttons and rules at her house than your librarian says you have to be quiet at library time, and your nanny has her own culture and ways that she wants things done. And really, to teach kids everybody is different is, I think, an important life lesson. So the truth is, we're not going to be, if we were all the same,
right,
then all the other people would be redundant. You would only need one person.
Right. And isn't that what we're really teaching kids? You know, we want them to learn from everyone. We want them to adapt or mold or be able to deal with situations on our own, except when it comes to discipline at home, where you go, no, it's my way or the highway, right? And so it's letting go of that concept. You mentioned Adlerian. Yep. And I know that can be a whole show, but what is the Adlerian parenting theory? Right.
So in a nutshell, when I say Adlerian, we're talking about Alfred Adler. He was the original theorist, and part of his philosophy is quite holistic. And when it comes to specifically around parenting, his ambition was to help parents raise kids to be cooperative, which is very different than parenting methods that use punishment and rewards that are trying to raise kids to be obedient. And obedience works in the short term, but it doesn't work when the authority figure moves away. It doesn't help kids learn to be problem solvers. So training for cooperation is a big part of Adlerian psychology. And then the second piece, and we'll talk about this throughout the different episodes, is, and there's many components, but I think one of the other key pieces for parents to know is that unlike other child guidance methods, Adler was always talking about understanding behavior in terms of what the child is trying to achieve. What's the goal of the behavior? What's the utility of the behavior? So we're always looking at if we understood the child properly, and we knew what they were trying to accomplish, we could help them accomplish those things without disturbing the peace or in a way that was not uncooperative or disruptive. And that's a very different lens and frame from a lot of the other types of child guidance advice that you're going to get.
So the thing I love about today's topic and the whole idea of parenting on the same page is that it does extend beyond the home, that it isn't just between co-parents. It's also all of the people that you talked about at the beginning of the show, the extended family, the teacher, the people in the community. I think, and I don't know, but when you get questioned, if this is your most asked question,
it is.
Is it mostly between parents?
It is mostly between parents because a lot of people will come for family counseling, and they will the presenting issue might be, oh, you know, we have this 5-year-old and we have these sleep issues. And by the time we get to the end of the first session, what you realize is that they're basically having marital issues where they're saying, just tell my husband that my way is right. And I'm kind of like the expert third party because she can't convince him to do it her way. And they get in power struggles about raising the kids. And in a sense, I mean, I have great compassion for that, because really, if you look at anyone's value set, most people, including both partners that are parenting this child, one of their highest values is that they really want to do right, do good by their kids. They love their kids. They want it, but they're very different in the methodologies.
Right.
And so, because it's so important, we have a hard time letting it go. Where, you know, if you're arguing over when you should cut the grass and how long it should be before you go out and cut it a second time, you're like, oh, whatever, it's the grass. But these are the children. We're gonna wreck them. You know, and so the stakes seem a whole lot higher, and then it ends up creating this conflict. Or, you know, I used to think you were such a great guy, but I see you yelling at the kids, and now I think less of you as a person, and now I'm falling out of love with you because I don't like how you have this relationship with your kids. Right. So it has rippling effects for sure, you know, and between the generations, where if you're the grandparents are looking after the kids and they're like a full-time caregiver, which is really lovely, and you're saving a lot of money because, you know, Oma and Opa are looking after the kids, but, you know, they come from the old country and they come from the old school and they're still happy to pull out the wooden spoon, and you're like, I took this parenting class and we don't do it that way anymore. And now we've got this riff in the family between the generations. So it can create a lot of tension.
Right. All right. You, a lot of folks sent in questions.
Yes. Thank you, social media. We love our social media outlets.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read one for you. My husband is lousy at disciplining our children. I am with them all day. I'm ready to put my feet up when he comes through the door. He's supposed to do tuck-ins, and he really wants to, since it's the only time he really has with kids, but it turns into a lot of silliness and horseplay. He can't get them to listen or settle down. In the end, I eventually have to go upstairs and get them to fall asleep, but now it's just that much later. I end up mad at them and him. I don't think she is alone.
Yeah.
Because I think there is always, it's that good cop, bad cop, I think, scenario in a lot of families.
Yeah, nobody wants to be the bad cop all the time, right? And you get that whole, you don't even have to be divorced to have the feeling that the other partner is like the Disney parent, the good person who gets all the fun.
Yeah.
And it's very common that by the time the working party comes home after the commute or whatever, it is kind of the end of the day. And quite frankly, I would say it's almost selfish when we disrupt the child's schedule. So children thrive on routine, and if their bedtime is 7:30 and you walk in at 7:25, don't keep them up till 8 o'clock because that's the only time you'll see them. I'm sorry, you're only going to see them for 5 minutes. Their bedtime needs to say at 7:30. Otherwise, you're really being selfish to your own needs, really. So I would say to that dad who comes home, or you need to maybe decide that if dad's not good at doing tuck-ins, that when you do division of labor, maybe that isn't the thing that he's skilled at. Mm-hmm. And so you might hand that off and say, you know what, you do baths, I'll do tuck-ins, because it just goes more smoothly. So I think a lot of people think if it's going to be 50-50 with your co-parenting, that it's got to be you do a night, I do a night. You do a story, I do a story. It's just so long as no one feels overburdened. And if he's failing at this and it's disrupting the whole household, maybe she should take that on and he could do something else. But alternatively, she could also say, it's your tuck-in, you do it any way you want, but when I hand over to you, I really am putting up my feet.
Right.
Meaning, if he stirs them up and he can't figure out his discipline, he's left with the consequences of not having figured it out, because he's going to be up there till 10 o'clock at night. And at some point, he's going to get frustrated and say, maybe I should see what she does on her nights, because they go really quickly when she does them.
Right.
And he might be more receptive to getting some tips, trying something differently when he hits his frustration. But right now, there's no benefit to him not just going up, having some fun, and then saying, now back over to you.
Right. It's also the time of day.
Yes.
Right? That doesn't help the situation, right? Because you do want to spend time, and it does maybe end up being a little bit more silly, and that just wires at
when kids and we've done sleep episodes, if they miss that little window of time where they're supposed to be winding down, they can get that second wind, and it can often look like they're actually not ready for bed. Mm-hmm. And they start to jump around just in order to, they stop for 1 minute, they'd fall asleep. So
Story of my life.
Yeah. So I would appeal to him to either don't come home until after they're in bed if he's coming home right at tuck-in time, or hand over tuck-in 100% and say, I trust you to manage it any way you want, and lay off his methodology completely, and at some point he will decide he's had enough, and he will be receptive to trying different things. Right. But it's really not your problem, and not your problem.
All right.
Not my circus, not my monkey.
kind of my monkeys, but I'm ignoring them at tuck-in time. Another question. My wife and I share custody of the kids. At her house, the kids are allowed a lot of screen time. At my house, I have very limited time, and I enforce it. They now think I'm mean and unreasonable. How can I get her to keep the rules the same at her house so I don't look like the bad guy? Again, we're talking about good guy, bad guy, but now it's two different homes. So I know this is a husband and wife, a couple who are no longer together, but this can also extend into those other families. So let's talk with, co-parenting and then extend.
Well, again, it's the child is trying to use the argument, well, we get to do it here, why can't we do it? Why are the rules different in our house? But that could also be at Bobby's house, they're allowed to play Fortnite, or at Bobby's house they can stay up till midnight. That argument of how other people run their families and run their homes is interesting to note, but it really isn't how our family rules are made.
Right.
And so to say, well, this is our house, this is how we work, this is how we operate. Other families do it differently. And that extends to saying, your mom is able to run her house the way she runs her house. She has her rules. She has the way that you guys operate over there. And go enjoy that, that's fine, but this is what our house looks like. And they might moan, and they might think you're the meanie. Parents think their kids have to be happy all the time. They don't have to be happy all the time. They can be really disappointed that you have limits on their computer time. They can even think that you're being mean and unreasonable. That's completely fine. But with time, and again, if you're being gentle in the way that you're using your approach, you don't be harsh about it and just be factual about it. You can go to commonsensemedia.org and say, well, I didn't just make up these rules arbitrarily. I'm following the guidelines that some experts have put out, and that's why we have those limits.
Right.
And if we've asked kids for some inputs as to what that might look like for our house, if you do all of that in the democratic way, the child might see the difference and feel they're getting the short end of the lollipop at the moment.
Right.
But time always proves to be, how you think your parents are smarter as you get older. I mean, at some point, these kids are going to be 18, 20, 22, and they're going to look back at their childhood and they're going to go, it was chaos at this house. This was the respectful one that had loving limits and boundaries. And they may not love loving limits and boundaries now. And they may make you pay for that with some mood and whatever. But if you're doing the right thing and you've got your kids back, you can say, I love you so much you don't get to play Fortnite. Right. I love you so much you have to give me your iPad at bedtime. You don't have that in your room. And it's okay if they're upset.
Yeah. It's funny because our line in our house is, well, that's because Bobby's parents love him more than we love you. That's which isn't necessarily the right thing I should be saying to the parenting expert in the middle of a show, but
everyone at home is going, what she said.
But they always go, Dad, because they know it's not true.
Tongue in cheek,
but
of course.
Yes.
And humor is a very important parenting tool. Yeah. Absolutely. And
well, if we loved you more, we'd let you stay out all night.
Yeah.
But we don't, so you're going to have to stay here.
You're going to come home.
That's
all
right.
Yeah.
What happens, though, because I know in this situation, if kids are at another house, whether it's a grandparent or their second, another home, the return time is always chaos, right? So when you are with one rule maybe for a week and then you come back to a different house, now it takes a couple days to get settled back into routine, and sometimes it's the ripple effect.
Yes,
that's the issue.
And I tell parents to expect that when you're making your custody arrangements. I find that those families that want to do the Monday, Wednesday, Friday versus 1 week at one house, 1 week at the other, because it takes some time to transition between the two. It's harder when you're back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Those longer spells seem to be better. And not that I want to dictate what anyone's parenting plan is. There's so many variables that go into it. But I would say, yes, you do have to expect that there's some transition time.
And not even that. So, the sugar diet that your kids are on at fun grandma and grandpa's house, now it's like having to go back into that routine too. So it's not just the two homes, it's just somewhere else or a friend's house for the weekend or a cottage, or you're dealing with that as well. But
kids will transition best if this is again so if your house is operating in one way, there's where that consistency is.
Right.
So the more that we don't make special exceptions. A lot of times exceptions to the rules can seem kind, but they often really just become ambiguous rules. And then that confuses children. And the way kids figure out rules and boundaries and limits is they test, they push. So if you've got a kid who's constantly wearing you down about wanting to have, you know, sugar or snack or something that you don't allow because they're allowed to have it somewhere else, chances are they have successfully at some point worn you down, so they know that maybe they've, you know, it's like putting the thin end of the wedge in. If I work it long enough. So now every day we're talking about candies and snacks, and you're like, why are we still talking about this? Don't you know the rule? But it's like, yeah, except for last week you got them Timbits when you say you don't give them any sweets. So they're like, nah, maybe I'll get that one Timbit. And they persist and they persist. So it's those exceptions that can add confusion to kids, and then we continue to get bad behavior that we don't want. So it's like, great, you did that at grandma's, but here, our rules are the same.
Right. Another question. My husband has very little tolerance for my kids' bad behavior. He yells at them a lot and punishes them, which I think is unfair and unreasonable. I prefer using consequences, but he disagrees. How can I get him to see your democratic methods are better when he won't even read your book? Who is he?
And that's why we do the television version. Maybe we need the podcast. We should do audiobooks.
That's right.
No, some people are never going to be, I mean, it's just a matter, it's just the truth. You know, as much as I'm on this world mission to help alleviate the suffering of homes by teaching these methods, not everybody's interested in learning, and not everybody's interested in the topic matter or whatever. It's just, that's just the truth of the matter. But let's not be fatalistic about it. What's really important, and this is the piece I think a lot of parents miss, kids are also smart. And they know that you get different reactions from different people. And so let's put a little bit of the burden on the kids to say, you know your dad has a short temper. You know your dad yells. You know your dad will be punitive if you act in that way. Mom might not, but this is what I mean about consistency. I want to be consistent in my parenting so that my kids get to know my personality, so that they can have expectations for how I'm going to react and respond. They're also going to learn their father. They're going to learn where his limit is, which is, yes, his wick is much shorter than Mom's, but they can figure that out. They can walk in and say, ooh, yeah, you know what? Dad's got that little grimace on his face. It was a bad day at work. We better be quieter today, because he's like Mr. Frustration guy who blows his top right away. And then they will learn to accommodate their behavior. And if they don't, in a sense, well, I don't want to say they're asking for it, but what I'm saying is they're wise enough to know, don't cross that line. You know what's going to happen if you cross that line. So if the father is being short and punitive, at least consistently, the kid can adapt their behavior in order to not deal with the wrath of dad. So it becomes much more problematic when the other partner pities the child, is angry at the other partner for how they deal with the children, and then tries to insert themselves as a barrier, protect them from the child. Because now we've got what we call triangulation. Now we start getting into this police, rescuer, victim thing. And what's interesting is that where people parent differently, that's exactly where kids will manifest the worst misbehaviors.
Right.
So I think the general rule that we have is don't interfere. They're having their own interaction between them. And so the general rule is whoever starts the discipline finishes the discipline. So if he in his heat of anger says, that's it, you lose your iPad for the week, and you think that that's too punitive and not a consequence or whatever, if the child comes complaining to you, you can be empathetic. You can say, oh, I'm really sorry you're having trouble with Dad. I'm really sorry you felt that was unfair or too harsh or whatever. I'm sure you and Dad can work it out. But now that that punishment, that's been doled out, I would have my partner's back, so that the child knows, I better not do that again. I don't want to lose my iPad.
Right.
Right. Now, you can talk to your partner sidebar and say, hey, you know what? I think that's maybe a week is too long, maybe a day, and maybe there's something that's more related than taking away their technology. You can have sidebar coaching conversations, but in the moment,
when they heat down, or
yes,
when they cool down.
When they cool down.
Yeah.
But the idea is, if we're looking at it from best practices from a child's point of view, they need to know that the leadership of their household is strong and united. And so just like if you're working in a corporate situation, if you feel like the upper executive is fighting between them and there's hostile takeovers and people disagree, that makes you feel like you don't have a stable corporation. You feel like you don't work at a stable workplace, right? So it's the same. Leadership in the family needs to look united and like to have each other's backs. So the forward-facing piece has to be that you're going to support one another,
right?
Not bickering and conflict, and then often the kids will end up feeling like I'm the reason they're fighting, and that puts a burden on them. Or they feel like, well, if I agree with mom, then I'm going against dad. If I agree with dad, I'm going against mom. All kinds of other psychological issues ensue from that,
and that ripple effect.
Yeah. So I would say you just whoever starts it finishes it. Talk sidebar about that. And then I think another big piece, because you know I'm a big advocate for having family meetings, if you and your partner don't see eye to eye on things, I think even more so would you be a candidate for family meetings. Because then what you're doing is you're talking all as a family about some of the issues and problems that arise in the family, and you're working with consensus to say, how do we solve it and what should happen if things go off the rails?
Right.
So now you're getting input from everybody. And you're much more likely to win one of the parents to say, okay, well, that sounds like a good idea. If everybody agrees that if you don't pick up your coat off the floor or whatever, then it means whatever consequence you come up with goes in a logical consequences box. Now everyone's on the same page. Now when you actually have to implement, you're not in the moment trying to think of what's the right or wrong thing to do, and you're not worried so much about who had a bad day at work. Like, you've already pre-planned it. You're just expediting the plan.
Right.
So I think that helps with non-consistent parenting.
Can we talk a little bit about extended family?
Yeah.
You know, what happens at birthday parties, at Christmas, Easter, all of those holidays where now you have extended family in and they're trying to discipline your children, or vice versa?
Oh, everyone's got an opinion about everyone's got an opinion about how you should be doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think the general rule of thumb, first of all, is most of what's going to happen in terms of your good parenting is going to happen in the boring doldrums of Monday to Friday, you know, wake up time to bedtime in your house, in your regular routines. That's where you're going to be effective. That's where you're going to make an impact on your kids. So it's Easter once at Aunt So-and-so's house and she's got some wacky... It's not like we think, you know, that's off the parenting plan. This is... It's like, no, it's... whatever. It's like if a kid's on an airplane and they're screaming. Like, I don't believe in bribes, but if I got a kid on an airplane screaming, like, how often do I take my kid on a plane? You know, I'm like, shut up, here's $5. Like, no one is, not quite, don't quite.
Show.
Don't, do we have outtakes? Are we going to have an outtake reel?
Now, but wait a minute, is that $5? Are you handing that out to the people around you?
Yeah,
or
that's
your
right.
own children?
Please write in for your $5 coupon from Alyson. I mean, the point is that we're all going to get our back up against the wall, and we're all going to be in sticky situations, but they're not everyday life. So whatever, survive the moment. I mean, parents take everything as being so critical. It's going to be so perfect. We've got to do all the everything else and said, all the Illyrians. We got to lighten up a little bit. So yeah, you know what? Someone else is going to discipline your kid wrong, and it's going to be like, oopsie, you know. But I think, if you're there and your child is there, you are the person who's responsible for your kid's behavior. You need to step up first.
Right.
Well, you know, now I might say, my child doesn't listen to me when I say don't jump on the couch. If you go over and say don't jump on the couch, that's going to have way more impact on them. So I might say, like, would you, not because I'm not handling my responsibility as a parent, but I'm actually looking at the needs of the situation and saying it's going to be more effective coming from you. And so you could elicit that help. But if they go over and start yelling at your kid, I'm just like, yep, that's your Auntie Joan.
Yeah.
You know, I'm okay. They'll manage.
But people aren't always okay. That's where it escalates, right?
Well, and that's where I'm saying I think parents need to just have more faith in kids, and that part of life, and again, this goes to the Illyrian philosophy, our job as parents is to prepare our kids for life, not protect them. And as we open the show, there's all kinds of different people with all kinds of different personalities. They're going to react and treat your kids in all different ways. And don't think your child is so inadequate or incapable of being able to react and respond. Not everything is like psychologically damaging. Not every raised voice is going to crush their little soul. You know, I think parents really get that part wrong. And so I don't want to sanitize and sterilize life and try to go to all the adults that are ever going to talk and interact with my child and say, be good, be kind, always say it right, never be punitive. Your child's going to experience, some people yell and some people are, and that's the reality.
And if they live in that bubble when they're young and then they go out into the world and start to experience it, that again is where some issues manifest.
Yep. To be able to talk to kids and to let them start to understand that, well, what could you have done differently? Right? Like in every relationship, they're also part of the equation. Oh, your teacher really yelled at you. Maybe she was having a bad day. What else, how else could you have been helpful in that situation? It's because that's the part about the agency. What are you willing to do? Rather than kind of like it was their fault and they yelled and they're wrong and it's always about the other person. It's like, well, you can't control them, but, what else could you have done in that situation? Been quieter, said sorry, not taken it as personally. So I think there's lots of parenting to be done in terms of talking to our kids about how other people react and respond and about that interaction.
Half an hour sometimes spending a day with kids can seem like a lifetime. Half an hour with you on a couch goes by like this.
Is that our time?
Just about.
We're going to need a countdown clock.
We need about a minute. I want to talk about your books. We had them up on the screen during the show for that gentleman who maybe doesn't want to read your books. So we're going to put them up again.
Okay,
so
just
that
in
way,
case.
yes. These are from a best-selling author.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Well, thank you, all those people out there that actually have gone and read them. Yeah, so, the first book I wrote was Breaking the Good Mom Myth, and that was really because when I would see people in counseling and coaching, I would have to correct a lot of misunderstandings about things that we do that we think are good parenting that actually aren't. And Honey, I Wrecked the Kids is about misbehavior and those Adlerian child guidance theory pieces. And then the last, Ain't Misbehaving, is really just a problem solution. Just go to the index, look up your problem. It'll tell you why they likely do it and what are 5 or 6 different approaches to correct the behavior.
The Coles Notes.
Yeah.
Also, want to mention your website, a wealth of information. You have a lot of topics, and you can search by topic on your website to be able to find out more information in addition to the books.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and people can jump on with comments and questions, which we use to populate some of the questions that come up in the show.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Always fun to chat with you about parenting.
It's always fun to be here with you. And certainly you can check out, we have topics every time we do a parenting show. We're always talking about different topics. So thanks so much for watching. And we'll see you next time on The Parenting Show.